Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And it's that time of year again where we do our National League predictions. And this time is for the 25-26 National League campaign. Before we get into all of that, I'm delighted to be joined by my partner in crime once again. Of course, Paul, it's good to see you back on the podcast. And of course, 24-1, how we do it. It's always that episode where we often receive a lot of criticism, like I think everyone else does.
Yeah. I think we've both found this a challenge this summer to work out who's going to finish where, Luke. And it's there's some big hitters still in the league. There's some drop down. There's obviously, we'll talk about the basket cases that are coming in, and those that are going to try and establish themselves in the league, and those that are going to hang on, and do what they can to survive, etc. So, yeah, I think from what sort of you consider is some teams are going to hope to be better than last year. Some are going to just hope to consolidate, and some are hoping they're not going to be worse than last year, which I think will happen when we go through the 24 with circumstances both on and off on the pitch. So a difficult one to predict.
Yeah, I think with predictions as well, and we say this every year, it's very hard to predict. And I usually, when I come to like this episode, unlike a lot of people, I kind of embrace it and I look forward to do my predictions, and I really go in depth with my analyst. And this year, I found it extremely tough, and it's kind of giving me a headache today. And I've been trying to do my predictions because there's certain teams where it's kind of nailed on for me where they're going to finish or whereabouts they're going to finish, and there's other teams where it's going to go significantly either way, where they could be in a relegation battle or they could be in a playoff race. But because of the type of players that they've signed, you don't know much about them, but there's that potential there, if that makes sense. So it's very, very hard. And I think when I did some early predictions to myself in like early July, there was probably one or two of these teams that I've got down there that I actually think I was thinking were going to be pushing for the playoffs. But however, due to recruitment, maybe not going to plan for them or not doing what I thought they might have done with splashing the cash, or even players that have potentially lost, I've kind of actually put them down there and expect them to actually be higher because of the size of the club or what I thought they'd be able to do. How's kind of your predictions gone? Do you feel, are you kind of satisfied with them, or are there a few where you're a bit like,
Listen, there's a lot of head scratching in terms of where do they go? Do they deserve to be higher? Should they be lower? There's a lot of unknown quantities. The 4 teams that are coming up, 2 teams that are coming down, and as we go through it, there's teams that underperformed last year, and there's teams that overperformed. And will they be consistent to keep performing? Will those that underperformed, have they done the right thing this summer with the management or with recruitment, or a mixture of both to see whether they can improve? We all know, Luke, in non-league football, there's issues off of the pitch in terms of investment, ownership, stability that does come into play when you're looking at how a team may perform, especially in those early months, because you have January transfer windows, you've got loan signings that can come in at different times. So, they're all going to be confident that they've done the best they can in terms of recruiting. It's just how well they all come together, 1 to 11, to go and play. But let's see. It all starts Saturday. Be interested to see how we all get on. Looking forward to it, to be honest. It's been a long break. It felt like a long break, but looking forward to seeing how the league does pan out.
Yeah, 100%. Been a long summer for me, a very enjoyable one. I say a long one, it has kind of gone quite quickly. But I haven't really looked into football over the summer. I've kind of done it in the past week or so where I've really got back into it, and I am certainly ready now for another year of National League football. If you are as well, please remember to like and subscribe. This is the home of National League content on YouTube. Also, check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. If you use the link in the description, you get 50% off your card machine, no contracts or monthly fees. So without any further ado, we might as well get straight into it. So in 24th place, I've gone for Morecambe.
snap. I think at the moment they've got to be considered in the league because they haven't been wound up, they haven't gone bust, they haven't been eliminated, or whatever the words you want to use. But I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I know that the players had real decisions to make as to whether they play or whether they train, and I don't know whether anything's been confirmed whether they will fulfill the fixture on Saturday. But yeah, it's not looking great for them, and unfortunately, I think even if they do survive come Saturday, are they going to survive the season? Are the players going to get paid? Will they start leaving? A real unknown quantity, Luke. And I guess I put them 24th because they might not last the season or they might not start the season. So I can't see them being anything other than that at this present time. I think we would like to be talking about them being in the playoff positions, potentially come the end of the season, having come down from League Two. But unfortunately, it appears that their owner is the only person in the world that doesn't want to sell a football club that he wants to sell, if that makes sense. So, unfortunately for Morecambe, which is a real shame, it would be great to have Morecambe fans come and join the pod and get to know them. I just hope for them they've got a football team at the end of this week, but it's not looking likely.
No, I think they need more than a miracle, to be honest, at this stage, if they are to participate in the National League this season. So I've got them 24th by default. However, if they do participate in the league this season, it's highly likely that they're going to have points deductions, which is going to have an effect. I think they've actually only got 12 players contracted at the moment as well. A lot of whom, the key players who they were hoping to keep hold of, have probably moved on now, I'd have thought as well. So I just feel like there's no other position for Morecambe. I think everyone who does predictions, I think I would go as far to say foolish to not put them 24th. I don't think there's anything in their favour for them not to finish any higher. And that's actually if they do participate this season in the National League. So we've both gone for Morecambe in 24th place. In 23rd place, I've gone for Braintree. What about yourself?
I've gone for Brackley. It was a toss-up. I've gone with Brackley. I think purely because there's always a team or teams that come up that struggle, Luke, and we know that, and we've seen that over the last few years when we've been discussing the National League, and they're going to be really gunning for it. I know, because they were forever trying to get into this league. I think they were in the playoffs 4 or 5, 6 times and not made it, and they have now made it. The challenge Brackley have got is similar to the likes of Maidenhead and Wealdstone and maybe Boston and Tamworth, who have had varying successes. Not a massive football club. Not sure whether they're part-time or not, whether some of their players are full-time, but I think, there's going to be a team that struggle, and I think Brackley's is the one in terms of being consistent enough to get results. They've got a young manager in Gavin Cowan. They've got experience at the back with Gareth Dean, who's I know was picked as in the sort of a first 11 by one of the Wealdstone fans when the Stones cast put together their sort of 11 from the National League, because he's a very good defender, but he is pushing on. I think he's about 35 now. So yeah, I think Brackley, have they got enough? It's a difficult one. You'd like to think that they may surprise a few, but I think they will struggle.
I've gone for Braintree then. Of course, lost key players in the summer in Lisby and Francis. But the concern for me, unlike other teams who've lost key players, they haven't been able to, find replacements. They've got a very thin squad as well, Braintree. They didn't start actually recruiting players until, probably in July, I think, late July kind of time before they actually started recruiting players. And I think a lot of this is down to the after effects of them actually overspending in the previous summer when they first got into the National League. Of course, they spent an awful lot of money. And at the time, I think a lot of people were impressed with their business. There were a couple of people out there who did, of course, have the concerns about if it doesn't go to plan, then they won't be able to recruit players in the season. And I think that's something that Braintree struggled with last season. And it feels like, and I'm getting the impression that it's actually had an effect on them in the summer. So if you actually look at the recruitment as well, it feels like they're taking gambles on young players from a couple of leagues below or the league below, the likes of Freddie Hockey and Fletcher Hubbins as well. They're players to me that I can't say I particularly watch much of. I don't think many people have. And the gambles, and yes, they could pay off, but for me, they're not proven enough for those replacements of the likes of Lisby, the likes of Francis. And, they've got an 18-man squad. Injuries affect them. They're going to be even weaker. I think if you actually look at the starting 11 as well that Braintree have got out, I think they've got the worst in the division of those who I think are going to participate. But also, I don't think they've got much depth to them at all. And that's a key reason why I actually think Braintree are going to struggle this season. And I've actually got them to finish 23rd place. Moving on to 22nd then. Who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone for Braintree Town. Very similar as to what you talked about, Luke. I think when you look at someone like Braintree, Tamworth, who we come to, as another example, Boston, is that second season syndrome. Braintree did very well to keep their heads above water and not really get involved too much in the relegation battle last season. But you're right. I mean, any team that loses their main output for goals or assists or that attacking threat, like Braintree having Lisby and not being able to replace him on paper as we see, that's going to affect their chances. You talk about Aldershot last year, very, very good, weren't they? They had the lad up top, Tolage, didn't they? Who went off to Port Vale as an example. Again, you've got to try and find replacements for these types of players, and they're not easy to find. We all know that. So, I think Braintree, they spent big last summer. Are they going to spend big this summer? No, we've seen that, like you've just alluded to. In a league, their budgets probably get more and more every year. Just to spend more to stand still is a difficult one. So if you're not going to spend as much as you did last year, and we'll allude to that when we talk about Wealdstone, it becomes even more challenging. And like you said, squad depth is always an issue. So, Braintree, that second season syndrome might catch up with them. They've got a good manager who kept them up, and they're going to have a bit of confidence off the back of that. They're going to have to think, well, if we finish fifth from bottom again, sixth from bottom again, so that's a win for them, and they can then keep establishing. But losing key players and having a very young squad there as well, it could prove very, very difficult for them in the long run.
At the moment, they've only got 16 players actually contracted as well. And they've only got 2 players over the age of 27. So they're lacking experience. And I think particularly when you're going to be a team that's going to be looking to just survive this season. And I think that is Braintree's main aim, is actually just to survive. I feel it's crucial that you've got experienced players in there that are going to be able to carry you over the line. And of course, they've got Akinde going forward, 36-year-old. He feels like the only real leader that stands out to me. And they were very reliant on him last season for his goals, and he's not getting any younger. I just feel like when I think of those predictions that I thought were quite easy, Braintree getting relegated was one of the easiest for me. Moving on to 22nd, this is probably one of the more comfortable predictions for myself. Maybe not because of who you are, Paul, being a Wealdstone fan, but I've actually got Wealdstone in 22nd place. I just think when I look at Wealdstone, obviously last season, they survived by the skin of their teeth. It felt like in the summer they really needed to heavily invest. I thought under the previous manager towards the end of last season, I thought they actually were building something then. I thought if they could just survive and keep hold of him going into this summer, I felt like they had the credentials there for him to be able to recruit hidden gems and build a squad that will be able to survive. However, from what I've seen in the summer, I just can't see Wealdstone surviving this season. They've got an unexperienced manager in Sam Cox, 34 years of age. In the managerial game, he may well be a good manager, but it's not the type of job that if I were thinking of a 34-year-old as my first job, I just feel like it's a very, very difficult job. he'll learn a lot from it, but he's been very restricted with the players that he can bring in because we all know Wealdstone have got a low budget. They're part-time still. We're not even speaking about who they've actually lost in the summer yet. Alex Reid, so reliant on him last season for his goals. He's got over 20 goals. I think if you take his goals away, it's obvious that Wealdstone would have gone down if you take the points that he'd have actually got for you. And for me, when I look across the squad, have they been able to build a squad good enough that's going to be able to, suppose, defend better and potentially score more goals as a team? For me personally, no. Omar Musa, who you've signed recently, was one that kind of stood out to me. However, he's so inconsistent. And when you know you're going to be down there, like with Braintree, you need leaders in the team that I feel are going to be able to step up and create moments of brilliance that are going to be able to pull you on the way to safety. And I just think he's capable of that, but it's not consistent. And I look across the whole squad, and it's a lot of players who are nearly players that aren't consistently strong. And I just feel like there isn't enough leaders in the team, particularly this season, for you to actually survive. And I just think it's going to be a really uphill battle with the players that you've lost in the summer. And yeah, I think a big reason why he survived was because of Alex Reid last season. And it's always going to be hard to replace him. But I thought maybe across the squad you might have recruited more than what you have done. So I've got Wealdstone in 22nd place. Of course, you'll have your own thoughts about that. I'm guessing you've not agreed with me.
No, not on that one. But it's not far off what I got, to be fair. So no, listen, your assessment is very much on the mark in terms of what we talk about Wealdstone. I'll talk about them shortly, but yeah, you're right. It's going to be a tough one for the Stones, and I don't think anyone's under any illusions. So for a number of different reasons, but there is positives to consider as well. And I think I look at them more being a fan than maybe I would have say Braintree or Brackley, etc. But yes, it's going to be a roller coaster ride for anyone down that bottom half, and we've had 2 seasons of it. So let's bring it on, even if we don't really want to see it. But yeah, I listen. You're not going to be the only one that puts Wealdstone in the bottom 4, and I completely understand why. First, right, I've gone with, and I did wrestle with this with Wealdstone being around there.
Yeah.
Now I've gone with Truro City.
Oh,
okay. Now I know they've invested. I know they've got a good manager in John Askey. I mean, to get him down there, to get them out of the National League South, he's done brilliantly because geographically it's a challenging place to recruit players. I just think when you look at Wealdstone, and I'll talk about Wealdstone because I've got them coming up. When you look at someone like the Stones, Boston, not Halifax, sorry, Tamworth, maybe, those sorts of teams that have been in the league and should be around that bottom. The thing they've got going for them is that know-how. They've been in the league. They've got players that have been in the league. And I know Truro City have got players that have been in this league. They've got players that have been higher. And, John Askey has done very, very well in his recruitment. They've got a lot of travelling to do, Luke, and that will take its toll. Will they be okay to score goals? I know defensively they can be very good. And that's what they build on. They'll play the game their own way. They'll probably play similar to the way Tamworth will, a bit more direct. There's more than one way to win a football match, and they'll find their way to win a football match if they have to. So it could be a battle of the bottom 5 on Saturday. Wealdstone are entertaining Truro at the Vale, so I'll get to see them early on and how they've settled in. But I've gone with Truro City, and it's purely around just that experience at this level, players at this level, size of the squad, and the fact that it's a lot of travelling, etc. So, they'll be good for the league, and it'll be a lovely place to go for many people, and they'll get good crowds at their new home ground, etc. So, there's a lot of positives for them, but I've got them just below the trapdoor.
21st place for me. This will raise a lot of eyebrows. I've come for Gateshead to take the final relegation spot. Of course, just missed out on the playoffs last season. Felt like in the past couple of years, they've been really building and heading in the right direction. Obviously, every season, I'm aware of it's the same this season for them. They lose a lot of key players. They find hidden gems. For me, this season, I just can't see it. And I looked last season towards the back end, and how rotten it actually did turn there with them missing out on the playoffs. The tweets that specific individuals such as Greg Ollie were putting out about the club. It just gave me the impression that something's not right there. And although I've actually spoke to Gateshead fans when I've been doing these predictions, I've tried speaking to them. What's it like that there now? What's the atmosphere like? How's pre-season going? Everything seems positive since then. They've still had a budget cut, and I think that's been seen in the recruitment. On paper, you probably look at the recruitment, Dom Telford, Harry Chapman, both coming from Barnet, a side that got promoted, you'll say, good individuals. For me personally, I'm not disagreeing with that. Very injury prone. And if you look at them, all the signings that Gateshead have made, the majority of them are injury prone players. And that's key. You could sign Lionel Messi. If he's injured for 3/4 of the season, he's going to be no use to you overall, is he? And I feel like that could be the case with Gateshead once again. They've lost the majority of the midfield. Harnett's gone. Akinola, Booty's gone. Obviously, Greg Ollie didn't particularly play much last season. I just feel like there's always a side that slips through the net. Last year it was Dagenham. The year before it was Boreham Wood. Why won't it be Gateshead this season? For me, I can see it. Obviously, you think of the amount of players that have come in, 9 new players. 9 players have left the building, 13 new players. A lot of them are injury prone, like I've mentioned. Their manager they've got, I've heard fans have actually stated that they're not particularly keen on him, and they've gone for the cheap option in Alan Armstrong. Very limited experience as well. Like I said, there's always a club that seems to fall through the net, and I just feel that this season it could well be Gateshead when I look across that squad. However, this is one of those clubs when I mentioned before we actually started doing our predictions. They could very easily shock a lot with the signings that they have made from the lower divisions as well, or if Chapman, Telford stay fit, and they could be right up there this season once again. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm sure that's going to be the first prediction that I think will raise a lot of eyebrows. Moving on to 20th place, then who have you gone for?
I've gone for Wealdstone, believe it or not.
I thought before we were going to actually start recording, but I bet he's gone for Wealdstone in 20th because he just can't put them to go down.
Like I said, it's going to be really, really tough, Luke. I'm under no illusions. There's players in there that survived last season. There's players in there that survived 2 seasons ago when we beat Oldham last. The manager was obviously in charge when interim basis when we survived 2 seasons ago up at Oldham, and I think they can draw a lot on that. I don't think they want to be in that position again, but the likelihood is that they're going to be. Listen, it's not lost on Wealdstone fans that, like I said, budgets tend to increase every year or seem to feel like they get bigger in National League clubs. We always hear rumours of clubs and what they spend, and we'll never really know. But we're pretty confident as Wealdstone fans that the budget is good for them, but it's not good for the league. And we've lost out on players who are, going to go and play in National League South or National League North because they're getting paid more money. It's the nature of it. We've been there and we've done it and we've survived, and I think that's the biggest thing. And I think also what Wealdstone have got to look at and be positive about is Sam Cox and his management team that he's brought in have worked extensively in the academy system, the youth system, and they know players that may be in and around clubs now or have left clubs and aren't being picked up or haven't played in the last one or 2 years. All those sorts of factors. Today they've signed Nathan Young-Coombs, who was at Brentford as Brentford B, scored loads of goals, did play in their first team once, has been in the Rangers Academy up in Scotland, and a kid that's got a bit of calibre. He just needs to play, and he could be the sort of catalyst for to go and have a good season. And we've got a few players like that. We've gone with Omar Musa, who's come up from Torquay, Sak Hassan, who was at #United. So there is a lot of unknowns in that squad. The biggest threat to it, I think, is if you look at the first 11, it probably could compete. You start looking at the first 16, could struggle a little bit. So the other good positive thing around Wealdstone, and it's worked out in its favour in the last few seasons, since Stuart Maynard was in charge and going forward, is that we've done very well in the loan market. We're a club that's respected in the loan market. We've got clubs that will loan us players because the development we give them and the the time we give them on the pitch, which may not happen at other clubs. There's been some real good success stories. So, and with Sam Cox and his management team knowing that type of market, then hopefully that will be a hugely important factor to us. And they've got to get that right to bolster what we've got, because I think what we've managed to recruit is very good for the budget we have. Yes, a lot of unknowns, a lot of unprovens, a lot of gambles, but I just think we'll just have enough. But it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty at all.
It's like we're doing this every single year with Wealdstone.
No,
I think you said very similar words last year and probably the year before. It's not getting any easier and all that. And to be fair, they may very well prove you right again and actually just survive. I think last season Wealdstone was one of my better predictions. I think I had them 20th place, and it did look like at times they were going to slip through the net, even on the last day. But no, moving on to 20th place for me, just to survive, I've gone for newly promoted Boreham Wood. Probably like Gateshead, it's another one where I thought when they initially came up, I thought, they'd be able to comfortably compete in the National League, probably be higher mid-table at least. However, just with the recruitment that they've made, they've not really recruited heavily, which I didn't necessarily say they needed to. But I look at the squad that got relegated, and this is probably my key point now. The majority of that squad is still with them under Luke Garrard. I think as Luke Garrard as a manager, I've probably known him as Boreham Wood's manager ever since I've been watching the National League now. He's been there. And he's a very highly rated manager. And for me, I can't rate him highly enough as a manager. However, one of his few faults, you could say, in that final season is he's very stubborn with the players that he's had for a long time. The likes of Reynolds, the likes of Bush, the likes of Sousa, they're players that have been there for a number of years now, who've gone down with Boreham Wood. And to be fair to them, when he came back to Boreham Wood, he's got them back up with this group of players once again. However, now I'd have thought maybe they'd have felt the need to recruit a few more players who'd be able to make it a little bit more comfortable for them heading into the National League this season. Now, Jeff King is probably the initial first signing that you look at and stands out as a wing back. However, he is a wing back. That's your best signing, a wing back. I'd have thought they'd be looking more further forward. Defensively, I think with Boreham Wood, they're probably going to be okay. But they let the best striker go. He's actually dropped down to Ebbsfleet, Appiah. I don't think there's particularly anyone out there who can see producing a lot of goals this season. And that's the issue I've got with Boreham Wood, is I just don't think there'll be enough goals in the squad for them to be able to progress further up the league. I think the key reason that I've probably got them just to survive over those below them is that they've got that experience now. They've got a manager who knows the pain of getting relegated, and I think he's more knowledgeable of what it takes to actually survive. I think previously when Luke Garrard was in charge of Boreham Wood, surviving in the National League never came into question for him because they were always looking to aim for the playoffs, and it probably came as a shock that he was in a relegation battle, and that's probably a key reason why they actually went down. Whereas this season, I think he'll be well aware that because it's the first season in the National League, the aim is to survive, and I just feel like they've got the experience to just about do it, but I just can't see them particularly shocking anyone this season, and I think they'll just about survive in 20th place. Moving on to 19th then, who have you gone for, Paul?
Scunthorpe United. The last time we saw Scunthorpe, they were bonkers, weren't they? I mean, they slipped straight through the net, back straight down to National League North. They've managed to get back up, and that's exactly what they want, and they're going to want to be EFL. But I think for someone like Scunthorpe, is they've got to respect the league. They've got to just come in, stay up, and see how they get on. They've got an unproven manager, I guess, at this level in Butler. but they've got players who have played in this league, and I think what will help them. And listen, I think similar to what you say about Boreham Wood, you could say about Scunthorpe is they could well be a team that pushes for the playoffs if they click and they get it right. I'm just concerned with them having come down, mismanagement over the years to then come back up. They'll be okay. A bit like Sutton when Sutton came down last season, just consolidate, do well, may end up mid-table, may end up looking at playoffs. I think when you look at teams above them, just a little bit more established in the league, a little bit more know-how, a little bit on and off the pitch. So yeah, I think I don't think they'll struggle, but I don't think they'll get any much higher than 19th.
I've gone for Brackley Town. Then, of course, won the National League North. It feels like they've been building up to get into this division for a very long time. I think I actually looked in the previous 7 seasons, they've actually been in the National League North playoffs and they haven't got promoted until this time. So I think the fans are more than ready for the National League. And I think because of that as well, it gives me the impression that as a club, they're in a position where they can actually be able to compete in this division because they've been building to it for a very long time. Unlike other clubs, you could say who've come up, you could say maybe they've come up a little bit too early. They've not got the squad that can really compete in the National League. For me, I think Brackley more than have. I think they've recruited well in the summer. I think going forward, they've got a lot of goals, the likes of Hall, the likes of Roberts, the likes of Lowe as well. And I think defensively, they've got a very good goalkeeper in Cameron Gregory, who's at Boston, of course. And that's crucial, particularly when you're down there. If you've got a strong keeper, for me, I think the amount of points that, I don't think people realise how crucial a keeper can be in any level of football. And I think when you've got a good one, he's going to be able to rescue a lot of points for you. And I think going forward, they're fine. I think they'll be a tough team to beat. And I think going to Brackley will be a tough place. So I think they'll be able to survive in 19th place. Moving on to 18th place. Who have you gone for then, Paul?
Boston United. A good, well-run football club who played to their strengths last year. Yeah, I know they were down there with us, with Wealdstone, and there was, they were coming and going, and then they just went on that incredible run, didn't they, after Christmas? And I think the challenge is to do that again. Not start the season like they did last season. If they do, have they got it in them to do what they did this last season in terms of that incredible run? They've had a bit of a turnover of players. They are reliant a little bit more on youth. They have brought in the likes of Lewis. Is it John Lewis from York as an example? But Graham Coughlan. The good thing about Boston is they're very well run. There doesn't seem to be any off the pitch issues. They're looking to consolidate and build and build and build. And I think, they're very much like a Tamworth, a Yeovil, Wealdstone in the past, Sutton last season, just those little sort of tiny steps to improvements all the time. So I don't think they're obviously not going to go down and in my predictions, but I don't think they're going to tear up any trees to be pushing any further, if that makes sense.
18th place for myself then. I've actually gone for Tamworth, and I actually think this would be a good finish for them. I think as a club, they would actually take just surviving once again in the National League, although it's quite a big difference to where they finished last season. I think going into a second season in the National League, the first season, of course, it can go either way. And the thing in Tamworth's favour was that a lot of people weren't aware of them. They weren't aware of the way they play. They didn't find ways to be able to stop them. And I think that was an issue for other teams who came up against them. Tamworth had this very industrial style of football that was very, very hard to play against. They were very hard to break down. They bullied teams off the ball. This season, teams are going to be more aware of that. And I still think it's hard to stop. It's hard to play against. But I think there'll be more teams that, like I've said, that will be aware of that. I think there's more solid teams this season in terms of physicality than what they have been in previous years. I think of the likes of Woking, I think of the likes of Sutton, Southend, these type of teams that I think will do well against them. And although they've recruited quite well, they've lost a couple of key players. Dan Creaney, a prolific goal scorer last season for them. Of course, they lost Nathan Tushunka towards the back end of last season as well to Eastleigh. I think he's since moved on. Has he gone? I think he might have. Did he go to you, or he went to another team in the National League? Did Nathan Tushunka anyway?
He started with Wealdstone, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he did. But no, I think when I look at the recruitment that they've made, Tamworth aren't going to be the type of team that will be able to splash the cash with these players that they've lost. But I think they've been quite smart and strategic with the players that they've recruited. Tyler Roberts from Fylde, people have probably heard me before on the podcast, actually, praise him. I've always thought that he's a raw talent that I think if the right manager gets hold of him, he's a player with a lot of potential, and he's gone there as well. And it was always the case with Fylde as well. I thought Fylde were the type of side where there were a lot of individuals in there. If they were just managed better, they could probably do a lot better than what they were doing. And a couple of them have, of course, gone to Tamworth as well this season. So for me, I just feel overall, it'll be more of the same from them. But I just think potentially a few more teams may find them out this season. And I don't think it's going to get any easier for them. And I think particularly after the first season in the National League, when you come up, if you're a side like Tamworth, like potentially, I think Wealdstone, you could compare them to, it doesn't seem to get any easy. It seems to just get tougher and tougher each season. And I think as a club, run very well. They'll be well aware of this, of what's expected this season. So I think they'll be able to survive in 18th place. However, I think last season, a lot of that was due to the momentum, why they did so well. And I just feel this season, it might be a little bit more tougher for them. And it's quite weird thinking I'm putting Tamworth in a low prediction, considering that when they first came up, everyone was like writing them off fully. 17th place then. Who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone for Tamworth. Very much what you said there, Luke. And, they've got an excellent manager in Andy Peakes. He will be under no illusions how difficult this league will be the second time around. I think you're right. Tamworth, and it is a nice place to go as a supporter. It's not a nice place to go as a football team because we know how they play. When we spoke with Andy and when we had an interview with him last season, he was quite honest and brutal in the way that he had to play to his strengths, and his strengths are very direct, get the ball forward, defensively okay, using the long throw, the plastic pitch, all these things. They're going to have to use that again, because I think you're right, Luke. The likes of Carlisle, Morecambe, if they survive, Truro, Brackley aren't really going to know what Tamworth are about. Yes, they all have analysts and they have scouts and they'll do their work and they'll watch video. It's a different matter when you go there or you have to play them. And, but there's going to be 17, 18 sides that know Tamworth now. And that's no disrespect to them. It's whether Andy Peakes and his team are able to maybe adapt at times, or whether that's what they play. Is that plan A is there's no plan B. Will we see that come to fruition throughout the season? Being part-time is another challenge. Wealdstone, these teams will find this more difficult as more and more sort of professional teams are in the league and for longer. So, yeah, I'm with you in terms of they overachieved. I think last year they had the run in the FA Cup and played Tottenham at home. They did so very well that I hope that there's not an expectation from their fans or from the National League fans themselves, across the board, who say, well, Tamworth should be doing better. If they finish fifth from bottom, I think they'll be pleased and they'll build. So, yeah, very similar. Boston, Tamworth, they've got that kind of feel to them.
17th place for myself, then. It's a bit of a flip here. I've gone for Scunthorpe United. Like Boreham Wood, I expected Scunthorpe recruitment-wise to recruit a little bit more ambitiously, potentially, when they first got promoted to the National League. Of course, historically and now, a very big club. I think eventually we'll be looking to get back into the Football League. I think the squad currently think they're far from being in a position where they're going to be able to push to be able to get back in the EFL. Last season's squad, likes of Danny Whitehall, Carl Roberts as well. These are individuals for me that are top-end National League players. I'd go as far to say Roberts should be in the EFL overall. When you think of that and you think of the recruitment that they've made overall, for me, I'm not particularly too impressed. A lot of players that are potentially gambles, you could say, which is quite surprising when you think of how big of a club Scunthorpe are. The likes of Billy Chadwick's come from York City, a player that, for me, I've always thought there's potential there, but it feels like no club's been able to get the best out of him. Eze, he's previously obviously been on loan at Halifax from Bolton. For me, seem very, very raw. And I think that's the thing with Scunthorpe. There's a lot of raw talent there that have a lot of potential, but I just feel like at this moment in time, the first season in the National League, I'd have thought Scunthorpe would be looking to sign established National League players, and I just don't think there's enough of that in the squad. Roberts alone is probably the type of player that can really make a difference on a position on where you are in the table. He's that good. He's one of the best players in this league as a whole, if not the best. The issue throughout his career has been injuries, and I think last season was the first season probably in the past 5 or 6 years since he's left Notts County where he's had a full season without really having too many injuries. And he was probably a key reason why Scunthorpe got promoted. Now, another season, another 46-game season in a more physical and demanding league. Is it likely that he's going to go a full season without having any major injuries? For me personally, with his track record, no. And I think if you take him out of the team, Scunthorpe become significantly a lot weaker. And that's probably a big reason why I've got them in 17th. I think they're too reliant on him. And I think if you take him out of the team, like I've said, they're a lot weaker. And that's why I can't see Scunthorpe basically pulling up any trees this season for me personally. Was that kind of your thinking with Scunthorpe? Or?
I think you're right. I mean, Cal Roberts is like your Nick Horton, isn't he? There's teams that have a reliance on an individual, and if that individual doesn't perform, then they could look like they struggle. Yeah, I think you're right with Scunthorpe. We haven't got them in very dissimilar positions, 19th and 17th. They've just got to get in the league and just get in the league and stay there, and then start to build. Because the last time they were in it, they were an absolute basket case, and they, like I said, they dropped straight away through. Were championship at one point, and all of a sudden the National League North. And I think their fans are just going to be happy they are where they are, and will want them to start building. There's going to be an expectation from the Iron fans to want to be in the playoffs because it's Scunthorpe United. They've been in the Football League. They're going to be one of those teams that, as we get up this table and start talking, we're going to start talking about established National League teams, EFL teams that want to get up. At the moment, we're talking about teams that are up, yo-yoing, that have just come up, that have been in the last couple of years. Scunthorpe want to be in that top half, and that will probably happen in a couple of years' time, as we may lose the likes of Forest Green, York, Carlisle, Rochdale. Scunthorpe will be the ones that step up. It's going to be too early this term, but give them a couple of years. As long as they're okay off the field, which they appear to be now, they'll start pushing up in the next few seasons.
16th place then, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Boreham Wood, and I think I take your sentiments around the league. The squad is very much what the squad was last season before. I think the massive bonus around what Boreham Wood have that maybe Scunthorpe don't have is a manager that knows the league. Now, the biggest thing that Boreham Wood will look at as a football club, and individually, the manager, Luke Garrett, will turn around and say, I will not make the same mistakes I made last time. Like you said, they were knocking on the door of playoffs for 2 or 3 years, good FA Cup runs, people got to know them nationally, and all of a sudden they're in the National League South. Like, bang, how did that happen? I think there was maybe a little bit of complacency, it was a bit stale. And they lost Luke Garrard. They brought in Ross Jenkins. That didn't work. Luke Garrard probably got his mojo back. He's had a proper good talk with Danny Hunter, the chairman, and gone, right, let's get the band back together and they've got through the playoffs and they've got into the National League. Exactly what I saw Luke Garrett at Hemel Hempstead game against Hornchurch. I went to watch a game and Luke was there and I saw I had a brief chat with him. How you doing? He said we've got 6 or 7 cup finals. You know, he was desperate to get back in this league because he wants to manage in this league. They're a full-time side. You know, you've got lots of positives. I think similar to Scunthorpe, they just need to respect the league, not get too carried away. They could potentially be in the playoffs if they do well. But I think you're right. The recruitment will come once they've established. He did a blog recently, Luke Garrett. They're doing some sort of behind-the-scenes thing through the club, and I noticed it. And he said he knew he made mistakes on the recruitment the last time they were in the National League. He's gone very much more conservative. He's gone with what he knows rather than going out there and trying to get more. I think potentially they're a club that will do well with the loan market. They've got a lovely setup, a great football pitch. You know, it's a lovely place to go and play. Will Luke Garrett decide to change his philosophies? Defensively, they're absolutely solid. I think going forward, you're right. They haven't got the shemangas of the past, but I think they'll do enough to consolidate in and around that mid-table position.
16 for myself then. I've gone for Boston. A big reason for this is due to the manager in Graham Coughlin. For me, overall, as a manager, last season, there were people suggesting that he should have been manager of the season. And I think if he'd have been there for the whole season and he'd have kept it up, which is a big ask like he did in that second half of the season, he probably would have been National League manager of the season for me personally. Yeah, I think when you look at the position that they were in last season, how he kept them up, I will never know. And I think in the summer, he's been quite ruthless with his recruitment. He's got rid of a lot of the players who he feels aren't up to it. He's brought in his own players, his own style of play now. You say about him being ruthless, he's lost 1 or 2 key players that are probably going to have an effect to him. I think one of them have of course, gone to Altrincham. But I do like the recruitment. I like Lennon John Lewis going there. It does feel very Boston-y for him to go there. They've also got Cropper. I think a lot of people will be aware of him because of the long throw. Now, if you've got a long throw going into John Lewis, I'm sure that's going to work a treat sometimes this season. But for me, overall, yeah, Boston. I think as a manager, I think he's one of the best managers in this division for what he did at the back end of last season. And he's had a full summer, but a lot of players have left. He's got his own players now. I think they'll be okay, Boston. And I think a 16th place finish would be acceptable for them. And they are the sort of club for me, when you look at the direction that a Gateshead and Altrincham have gone in the last couple of years, I feel like over time, that's the direction that Boston are wanting to go in, is to aim for the playoffs. I just feel like at the moment, they're just lacking that little bit of quality overall. And still that experience in the division. Of course, it's only their second season in the division. And I think this season, they'll just be hoping for a more comfortable campaign than the previous one. 15th place, then, who have you gone for?
Solihull Moors.
Not down to the manager by any chance.
Well.
It is with me when they're not far off for me. So
the manager is one, you know. They've just lost their director of football, Stephen Ward. Who's going to replace him? Will that affect who the manager is longer term if the manager doesn't start well? Yeah, is Matty Taylor a National League manager? On the basis of his last few seasons being in it, no, he isn't. You know, I hope to God for Solihull fans that he's taken this league a little bit more seriously this summer than he did when he became a Wealdstone manager. And admittedly turned around and said, I didn't really know the league too much. You know, so he's gone and signed a couple of players he knows about. You know, who knows? They're a well-established National League team. They've got a great little setup, not the biggest fan base, but it's a well-run football club. What happens with the director of football? Do they replace him? Will they go down a different route in terms of the structure on the football inside? Will Matty Taylor actually put a bit of a shift in for them? I don't know. You know, listen, they've signed Dan Creaney from, you just mentioned Tamworth. Signing a goal scorer in the National League is something that every club wants. He's going to go and play at Solihull full time from Tamworth, which is part time. it can only be good for him. So I don't know. I just can't see them challenging like they did prior to last season until they start to just sort of get
until they get rid of Matt Taylor.
Well, no, not necessarily, because Matt Taylor may improve. I'm not, I've got nothing personally against Matt Taylor.
Yeah.
I saw him manage the football club I support, and I didn't think he did a very good job. I think Solihull fans have said the same thing about him at Solihull. He's got to prove himself this season. He can't keep pretending that. You can't live off the name of a Premier League footballer, which he was, a very good footballer. He's now got to prove himself as a manager. So, he's got a summer. He's had this summer to recruit players he wants, get rid of players he didn't want, implement his style on a full-time basis, which is something he didn't get at Wealdstone, which may be a benefit to him because that's the environment he's used to. So, good luck to him, and I hope he does well, because I don't, like I said, you don't want to see any managers struggle. You don't want to see any managers get sacked. But I just don't think Solihull Moors are going to be the threat that they were prior to last season when Andy Wing was in charge.
15th place myself, then I've gone for Truro City, and this could be quite a bold prediction. I think a lot of, not as many as I thought, but a lot of people, of course, have got them in the relegation zone. A big reason, I'll be honest, is down to John Askey being in charge. For me, I think he's an elite manager at this level, one of the best. Recruitment-wise, I've been really impressed. I'd have thought, being where Truro are based in the country, being so distant from every other football club around them, I thought it'd be very hard for them to be able to recruit players. Yeah, I think they've recruited a good group of players for me overall. I think as well, last season's squad, it won the National League South. Yes, we say it's a big step up, but usually those who win the division in the league below seem to do better, as you'd probably expect, than those who come up via the playoffs. And for me, I just feel like they're going to be very strong going forward. The likes of Tyler Harvey's played at higher level. He's been prolific at higher levels as well. They brought in the likes of Pike as well, who's played in this division before. There's a lot of players in the squad, a lot of attacking players, where there's bound to be at least one of them that's going to become prolific for me this season. And that is what's key to be able to survive. I think they've got a good goalkeeper there, very good last season for them. They're an unknown quantity as well. Potentially, a lot of people will be thinking, well, you're just basing this off how Tamworth did and how they proved everyone wrong. And to be fair, I have to take that on board, what Tamworth did, because everyone just wrote them off, said, we don't know much about them. They're an unknown quantity. We're going to put them down. But like we saw last season, it can work in your favour. And I think it will in Truro's case. And I just think John Askey's the type of manager that knows this league like the back of his hand, and he knows what's needed to be able to survive. And I think he's been well backed by the owners there, and I think he's brought in players that know this division and will be able to play at this level and be able to comfortably have them staying up. And I think going forward, they're going to be very entertaining this season. I think you think of sides in the past like your Dawkins. I think Truro give me similar type of vibes, and yeah, I think they'll be fine, and I think they'll comfortably stay up. If I'm being honest. Moving on to 14th place, then who have you gone for, Paul?
Gateshead. I understand what you're talking about in terms of not being able to challenge like they maybe have done. We've talked many a time around the churn of players, the churn of managers. They're finding it more difficult to find players. They're finding it more difficult to find that manager that's got that golden touch. Yes, have they gone cheaper with Alan Armstrong? Similar to Truro, right? In terms of geographically, that's a tough place to go and recruit. Yes, there's big football clubs in and around them, which they can benefit from academies of the likes of Sunderland, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, etc. But we know what they've had, the challenges off the field, which came about last season, which we didn't really see before. Obviously, they had the problems of being in the playoffs the season before that, and that was sorted out. But they have done an amazing job of pulling rabbits out of hats and finding managers and players that fit with the philosophy of Gateshead, who are probably one of the best, if not the best, footballing team in the league consistently over the last few years. Haven't got a big fan base. They don't play at the best football ground. It can't be a pull for players to go there because of that environment they're playing in. And that's no disrespect to where they play. It just is what it is, And it's just getting more difficult for them. And like you said, if the teams we're going to talk about now, Luke, I think we're falling into a category when you look at them is if they don't start well, managers are going to be under pressure. Because they're the teams in the mid-table that could be in the playoffs. They're the teams that are mid-table that could actually be in the bottom 4 or 5 after the first 5, 6, 7, 10 games of the season. And I don't think Gateshead are far off that type of team at this present time. So, if Alan Armstrong doesn't start well and the fans start to think, shit, we need to change. When I start looking at the other teams we're going to talk about now, they're very similar in that sense. There's a lot we could talk about actually when you go through the teams in this sort of bottom half. There's a lot of unproven talent or gambles, in this league, and Gateshead are going to have to be a team that rely on that, and are going to be a team that rely on that. So I don't think they'll move away from the philosophy. They'll keep that footballing philosophy they have. They will get good use of loan players, which they've always had. But it's just getting more difficult for them, and similar maybe to other teams in and around this. I don't think they're going to be pushing on and knocking on the door of the playoffs this time round.
14th place for myself then. I've gone for Aldershot Town. I think the way they've recruited this summer, I think they've took less gambles and recruited more well-established National League players, which gives me the indication that they're not going to be in a relegation battle, but they're not going to have the quality to be able to push on for the playoffs. And that's why I've got them 14th, which is mid-table. Ryan Hill coming from Dagenham was probably one of the bright sparks last season for them. Tristan Abraham's coming in, he's a striker that guarantees goals, but he's not going to be prolific based off his track record as well. They had a lot of players out injured last season who were actually out injured for the whole season, who I thought were good players. And it's kind of like a new signing for them now. I believe Luke Jenkins is still there. He's a defender for me who, when I saw him play against Halifax, I thought was a very strong defender, and I think was quite a marquee signing when he actually made the step up from the league below. So I like the look of that signing as well. And I like Tommy Widrington as a manager. I think he's a good manager. I think they'll be very entertaining to watch, like they always are. And I think they'll be fine, to be honest, from relegation. I think they'll have a slight improvement on the previous year. But I just look at that squad overall. Yes, it guarantees goals. Yes, the way they're going to play is going to mean they're going to be a bit leaky defensively. But I spoke about gambles and how sides shouldn't take gambles. Potentially for Aldershot, should they have taken more like they did when they did with Tollage and Stokes? And for me, I think if Aldershot really wanted to push on with the budget that they've got, if they're going to find a way to kind of push for the playoffs, they're going to need to find hidden gems. And I think this time around, they've gone with the idea of finding well-established National League players that are going to be able to keep them up safely. And that's why I've got them in 14th place. So I think a prediction where I think as a club, I think Aldershot will take that. As a fan base, I think they'll probably be hoping to push for the playoffs with the size of the club. 13th place, then, who have you gone for?
Yeovil Town. I think, Mark Cooper falls into that bracket, the Gateshead manager, Matty Taylor, and others around. If they don't start well, it could be challenging for him because they've got new ownership. Have they backed him? Time will tell. They've got a really good spine of that team. They've just brought in Junior Marias from Notts County, who had a really good loan spell in the National League last season. They can get him fit, drop a bit of weight, get him match fit. I saw him play for Notts County at the end of last season. He was looking a little heavy. He always has, but he was looking a little heavy. If they can get someone like him going, Mark Cooper, he knows what it takes to win the National League. He knows what it takes to win National League North and South. He's done all three of them. So they've got a good manager there. the fans have got to be patient. I know they don't particularly like him, but he is ruthless. They've just got rid of Aidan Stone, who's gone to Truro City on a 1-year deal. The goalkeeper brought him in only sort of back end of last season. Obviously, didn't deem him good enough, and has gone and signed Jed Ward, who was doing very, very well at Bristol Rovers, who I saw play on loan at Wealdstone a couple of seasons ago, and went back into the EFL and made appearances. So, he's making decisions. He's making tough decisions, but I think that's because he's got a lot to gamble on for himself and the team. Because we know what new owners are like, Luke. Owners come in, they'll stick with a manager for so long. As soon as it doesn't go well, they've got their own ideas and they'll go and get their own managers. So I think a tough one for Mark Cooper, because I think he's going to be under pressure. They're going to have 3,000 to 5,000 at Hewish Park every week. They're expecting them to be pushing for the playoffs. I think, are they good enough? Potentially, but I just see them being consolidating in mid-table once again this season.
13th place for myself then. I've gone for Solihull Moors, and I am actually predicting that the first manager to be sacked this season will be Matt Taylor, and that's why I've not got them lower. It's part of the reason I've actually got them 13th as well. I think as a squad, there's a lot of players in there that I like the look of. The likes of Osborne, I think he's a quality player in the midfield, one of the best in this division in what he does. Of course, yes, they've lost one or two players. I think not Creaney, Stevens is probably the key one, but I think they've replaced as good as what a side like Solihull can, bringing in Creaney. I think it makes perfect sense geographically, not far from Tamworth for him. It's a good signing, I think, and I think he's going to guarantee goals in a more attacking-minded Solihull side, you'd have thought, compared to being with Tamworth. But it just feels like potentially off the field in terms of the sporting director leaving, the Matt Taylor, so with everything that's happened, I just can't see him coming back from it. I think the pressure really is on him now because he's had a full summer bringing in his own players. He's clearly been very well backed. If he doesn't start those first 10 games well, I would like to think he would be out of the door. And for me, I just don't rate him much as a manager. And I think he will know by now that most people in the National League don't rate him as a manager, and he will be looking to prove them wrong. For me, I just think I just can't see it. I just think Solihull, with everything that's gone on with losing the sporting director, I just think they're gonna struggle this season, and I think they'll get better as the season goes on when they bring in a new manager, which I predict will actually happen. So yeah, I've got Solihull in 13th place overall, but I think as a side, as starting 11, they should be a lot higher than that. 12th place, then who have you gone for?
There's a little team that you might know called FC Halifax Town, Luke.
Very low prediction.
Well, yes, and purely based on the fact that they've had such a change, haven't they? Chris Millington's gone, and they brought in Adam Lakeland, who's an unknown quantity at this level, young, hungry. I think a positive appointment, without a doubt, but unproven. And I think that's probably what will hold Halifax back. It may be the thing that sparks them and does what they haven't been able to do and kick on and stay in that playoff place or get in the playoffs and do better, like they have in the last couple of seasons. But I know you've talked about it over the last few years, and we talk about it offline. Fan base is up and down. The budget, is it as strong as it could be? I think with Halifax there's a lot of unknowns because they've got an unknown manager off the back of two or three that have been pretty well known and have done pretty well. So you're going to know more than I am in terms of how you feel Halifax will do. But I think if Adam Lakeland can establish himself as the manager there, not be too horrific or have such a bad start that he's under pressure because he is this unknown quantity, and why have we appointed someone who doesn't know the league and all this stuff that might come out on social media from fan base, is if he can just sort of consolidate the team. That's not to say that they won't get better next year and actually probably eclipse what maybe Chris Millington did. they might not look at the FA Trophy like they did previously and try and go high. They will concentrate on the league, but you'll know more in terms of the feel of what it's like as a fan there, Luke. But I think they're going to be safely in and around mid-table, and I do hope that the appointment of a young up-and-coming manager is a successful one for Halifax and as well as him himself.
12th place then for me, I've gone for Eastleigh, of course, financially well backed by Stuart Donald. And similar situation to Solihull, Keenan Davis as a manager, do I particularly rate him? I think of last season's squad, and I thought they did underachieve in the position that they finished in. This season, I think recruitment were looking very strong, and I had them slightly higher, but they've just recently lost, of course, Tyree Shade, which gives me the impression they're going to be very reliant going forward, particularly with the losses of Quigley leaving. They're going to be very reliant on Paul McCallum to score the goals. And in the last couple of years, particularly last season, he's not been as prolific as the McCallum as old, you could say. And I think this season they're going to be very reliant on him once again for the goals with Tyree Shade leaving. You could flip it and say because he's left, there's more opportunities for McCallum to be the star man once again, and he may be able to score more goals. However, I just think overall there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. The signings that they've made, the likes of Lundstrom coming from Oldham, I think it's a great signing. I don't think Oldham utilised him in the best way. I was quite surprised he went to Eastleigh. So I think at Eastleigh he could do pretty well. I thought he was good at Altrincham. But yeah, I just think Keenan Davis as a manager, I don't particularly rate him too highly. And I think there's a lot of clubs in the past, Eastleigh are a prime example of that, who've always had quite a lot of money, always had quite a high expectation, but season after season just fail on making the playoffs. And I thought last season they had a good squad and they finished about 13th, 12th. And I think this season, with the manager for me, the losing the likes of Shade, I just don't think they're going to have what it takes to be able to push on and make the playoffs once again, because I look at these sides above them and they're very, very, very well run clubs on the field. The signings they make aren't just signings marquee to put on social media to kind of, put a lot of hype about the club up. They're signings that are strategic, and I don't think Eastleigh are particularly strategic, unlike these clubs above them, and that's why I've got them in mid-table. 11th place, then, who have you gone for?
Aldershot. I think with Aldershot is we know what we're going to get with them. They're quite expansive, aren't they? Well, I think ever since who was the centre half that went to York that didn't work out? It's gone out of my head.
Oh, Cordner.
Since Tyler Cordner went, because he was a real stalwart for them, and they were always susceptible to letting goals in, but they were always good at scoring goals, and we knew that, with Tolaj and Stokes. And last season, they weren't able to maybe replicate the goal scoring as well as they could have done, and that's what's held them back. I think you're right. Ryan Hill coming in. I remember watching Ryan Hill playing the National League South for Hampton and Richmond Borough, and was very impressed with him at that level. And he's gone on and played at Eastleigh and Dagenham, and he will be a real threat that will help offensively. Bringing back Kwame Thomas, who knows the club, who knows the league, again is something that's going to be useful to them. And I think there's a lot of familiarity in that squad. They winning the FA Trophy is something that's going to almost bind that squad together and give them something that other squads haven't had. And I don't think Tommy Widgerton comes under that bracket of if we don't start well, is his job under pressure. But they are going to want to maybe be better than they finished last season. But I just, again, they're that mid-table team like the Halifaxes and Yeovils that could potentially be knocking on the door of the playoffs. But there's too many bigger teams above them, I think, will finish above them naturally. So hence why I've put the Shots in there at 11th place.
11th place for myself then. I've gone for Altrincham, who only 2 years ago actually made the playoffs. Last season, I actually thought, when I look back now, with how well they recruited in the summer and the likes of Newby and Linney, I look back now and I actually think they probably underachieved not making the playoffs. Of course, Linney and Newby have actually moved on since. And with any club, we saw what it did to Aldershot. It's very hard to replace those players. The season prior, of course, Con Clark left and Linney and Newby seemed to step up. But there's no one actually who I think was there previously who I could see stepping up and being prolific. Ollie Crankshaw could be potentially the only one, but he's never been prolific in his career. He's had a lot of injury issues, and that's an issue with a lot of the players at Altrincham. A lot of players that are injury prone, Coslow, Crankshaw, got the ability, but they're injury prone, and if they're out for half the season, they're not going to be much use. Recruitment wise, they're another club, they can't go out and splash the cash. Of course, they've got Ward, who's coming from Boston, who I think is a great signing. Gale as well has come from Mansfield. I think he was actually at Boston. I think for me overall, I wouldn't say it's a bad finish for Altrincham with that squad overall. I think they've got a good manager there in Phil Parkinson, but probably with the losses of Linney and Newby, have they overall built a squad where they're going to be able to produce the goals that are going to make up for those that they're going to lose? For me, overall, no. I think defensively they were fairly decent last season anyway, and I think they'll be okay again. But going forward, I just think it's going to be too hard to replace those players like it would be any club. And I just think Altrincham may slip off a little bit this season and finish about 11th place overall. Moving on to 10th place, then who have you gone for?
Altrincham. Again, similar to you, Phil Parkinson has the opportunity now to try and, or has had the opportunity to try and push this team on. And have they done that, Luke? I don't think they have they? I know they've had injury problems and they've lost a good few players. But have they lost the likes of Regan Linney because they haven't pushed on as much as Regan Linney would want them to? You know, they find him, he does well. Will they build a team around him? Have they done that? No. You know, so Regan Linney's going to move on. And this is the problem Altrincham have, right? Is they need to build on what they had, and they've never managed to be able to. Who's the lad that's just been released from Chesterfield that played in the National League? Cole Clough. You know, he's the he's the type of player. Should they get him back, excellent in National League. He'll be a great pickup for anyone in the 24 teams, let alone the teams that we're going to talk about in the next, 10 teams in the top half of the table. So, can they get someone like him in to add a bit of quality? Should they be tapping into Man City, Manchester United, Salford City, whoever it is geographically, to help them with their loan signs, which they've had on previous occasions and have worked well? But I think we gone are the days of talking about Altrincham progressing well, going from full part-time to full-time and finding the likes of Linney and getting in the playoffs and doing well in the FA trophies. They've just stagnated a little bit. And I think there's a real problem there for them potentially, and for Phil Parkinson, if they don't again start well, because actually they are standing still that little bit in and around those teams where they should be pushing on. And I think they're a little bit like an Eastleigh. Eastleigh, I think, are slightly different. I'll talk about them in a moment. I know you've touched on them yourself in the prediction you made, but they need to push on now, Altrincham, and not stagnate.
10th place for myself. I've gone for Yeovil Town, which I think is quite a high prediction. A lot of people have got them quite low, and at first I did. But then I remember defensively last season, they were very strong, I thought, Yeovil overall. The issue was, of course, scoring goals. And I think that's an area they have really addressed in the summer. Tavon Campbell, I've got my mixed opinions about him. But to be fair, I think Rochdale got the best out of him. Why can't Yeovil get the best out of him? And I think if they do, they've got a striker that can score a handful of goals there as well. They've obviously signed Daly, who's come from Harrogate. I think for me overall, I like him as a player. I think he's a quality player on his day at this level as well. Particularly, I think he'll be probably one of the key men there for Yeovil. And they've kept the likes of Jarvis as well going forward, who was probably one of the only forward outlets that they had last season that they could rely on. And you've got him, and then you've got someone like Tavon Campbell who can hold the ball up well. For me, overall, I've been quite impressed with the business. I think defensively they'll be strong, and I think they'll be better going forward. And that's why I've got them to progress a little bit. And yes, on paper, I don't think anyone will look at Yeovil and go, they're splashing the cash. And it's the same with a few of the other clubs that I've put above. But the thing is, what I've noticed over the last couple of years in this division, you don't necessarily have to do that, I don't think. I think if you've got a good squad there, what's more important is about being strategic with the actual signings that you're making. And that's something I think Yeovil have done. I think they've addressed the positions that they needed to address. They didn't need to bring many more defenders in. And I think they've actually just made themselves a lot stronger going forward and in the middle of the park. So I think Yeovil, for me, overall, I think they'll finish in 10th place this season, and probably the year after will be looking to actually get into the playoffs, and they may well do this season. I'm not saying they won't. Moving on to 9th place then, who have you gone for?
Eastleigh. And I think these are a real enigma, aren't they, Luke? I mean, I can't... I think what we can guarantee with Eastleigh is at some point they will win a load of games, and at another point in the season, they won't be able to pick a point up. Last season, they started off like a steam train and the first 12 games, 15 games, they hardly dropped a point. And then they couldn't buy a win. They are a team that massively need to be consistent. I think we spoke about Oldham being like that when they, prior to getting promoted last season rather, just show a little bit more consistency. And I think the benefit Eastleigh have is they do just go along their way. They're not, their fan base isn't the biggest. They're not the most vocal, on social media. They just sort of, they plod along. And I think if they can just get to grips with this consistency, they're going to be a real threat because they do have quality on the pitch. They do have investment off the pitch. Like you said, being able to recruit players that were living in the north to come and live down in the south, that's not an easy thing to do because of cost of living and wages and everything else. So, there is a financial pool there for them. And it's a nice little ground. It's well set up. They've got everything going for them to really push on. They've now just got to come and do it and do that by being more consistent. I don't think they'll be as consistent as they need to be, hence why I've put them in 9th and you've put them in 12th, because I just think, they need a bit more. Will Kelvin Davis survive the season? Again, he was a bit of an unknown coming into management in the National League. He had coaching credentials and played in the Premier League and had a good football career. How much will he be under scrutiny if it doesn't quite pan out, because it's a club where they can probably afford to recruit another manager if needs be, and someone who's a name, etc. So yeah, a challenging one for Eastleigh, but I can't see them quite having up when you look at the teams above them. And I think it's going to be easier to start talking about the teams above rather than and to why we put them where they are. And I think Eastleigh is just the inconsistency of them again might hinder their progress.
9th place for myself then. I've gone for my own team FC Halifax Town. And a big reason why I've not put us in the playoffs is probably because of it being a new manager that's not been in this division yet. And of course that could work in our favour. And I think it will overall. I'm just thinking of the clubs above us and some of the experience that they've got overall, I just think will counter above us. However, talking about Halifax with the recruitment, doing the usual young, unproven talent. But we've got a very good track record of finding hidden gems. And just because Millington, just because Wild's left, doesn't give me the indication that that's going to stop anytime soon. I still think that's the route that we're looking to go down. And I think it'll be the same. I think there'll be a couple of players at the end of this season who will be going to move into the EFL, who probably no one's even heard of before they actually signed for Halifax, but will probably end up being well known when they actually leave the club. And I think it'll be the same. like I said, I think the difference is this season is the players that we are recruiting that are young and coming from the lower divisions instead of falling out of the academies. Of course, 1 or 2 have coming in who've fallen out of academies. Pre-season, unlike previous years, we've done very well of Halifax. For me, I don't think it counts for too much. I think Gateshead are having a good pre-season. I still think they'll struggle this season. But I do like the recruitment overall. I like the way we look. I like the look of Adam Lakeland as a manager. He excites me. I think we'll be looking to play quite exciting football. And when I say we're bringing in a lot of youth, I think we've signed 1 or 2 experienced players, and I think we've got a bit of experience, particularly at the back. The likes of Hobson, who's come in. I think he's probably the marquee signing of the summer. Of course, he's coming from Oldham Athletic, who another Oldham, like they did with Lundstrom, I don't think utilised him correctly. I think he were very, very good at Southend and didn't particularly get played at Oldham. I think at Halifax, he's guaranteed to start most games, and he's a true leader. And the likes of Johnson in net, you've got probably, in my opinion, the best goalkeeper in the division. So we've got all the foundations to go again and push for the playoffs. I just feel like with it being the first season for Adam Lakeland, the difference where other clubs, as the season goes on, are able to recruit heavily, where we potentially might not be able to, might just counter against us. And that's why I've got us just to fall short. However, I will not be surprised if we sneak into the playoffs once again for the 3rd year running. 8th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
Oh, this was a real tough one, because whoever I put 8th, you might work out who I put 7th, and I think that's going to be my wild card guess. So I have put Sutton United in at 8th, and I know I put them in the playoffs last, or get promoted, wasn't it, last year, coming out of VFL 2. What I really like about Sutton is the fact that they've come up from the lower leagues. I used to watch them play as a kid in the Ryman's League, Southern League, etc. And they've gone all the way to EFL 2. And it's taken them 25, 30 years to do it, but they've done it slowly and they've done it well. And again, then there's no basket case around this football team when they came down from EFL 2. They changed the manager. They brought in Steve Morrison. And Steve Morrison went with that blend of a little bit of experience, got rid of all the dead wood and all that, the guys that got them relegated through no fault of their own, got rid of all that negativity, I suppose you want for a better phrase, and changed it up. And last year they really consolidated. And I think, again, they'll do that this year. And they've quietly gone about their business. There's no big fanfare around Sutton, but I think they will be very, very competitive. They've got a competitive manager. He wanted to win on the pitch when he played, as a robust centre forward, and his teams play the same way. I think they'll be better for this season, having played last season, if that makes sense. They could easily be knocking on the door of the playoffs. I think they just might fall short, and that's why I've gone them to as 8th place.
I think this is probably the second prediction we've agreed on. I've got Sutton United in 8th place. Feels like when they came down, that first season was to consolidate. A lot of new players came into the squad. This season, I think there's an expectation for them to actually progress on. Of course, they lost the main striker in the summer who's gone into the EFL. I think he's gone to Fleetwood. But I think that could potentially benefit them, because I think as a team, I think they're starting to build a starting 11, a settled starting 11 with that manager. I think the way they've recruited, I think I like it overall with what they've done. The only interesting thing was Curley obviously being released, but obviously doesn't seem to be in their plans going forward. But no, for me overall with Sutton, I look at them. I look at the way they're heading. I think they're heading in a positive direction, I should say. The reason I've got them just to finish outside of the playoffs is quite a silly reason, but I just feel the manager, that lack of experience compared to 7th and 6th particularly, I think will be key towards the back end of the season. And I just don't know if Sutton are going to be able to actually be able to climb into the playoffs. But I do think they'll start well. I think they'll be well around there throughout the season. And I think they'll be a very tough team to beat. I think it'll be more of the same of what we saw in that first half of the season last year. I just don't expect them to drastically fall off like they did in that second half of the season. However, I do feel they're going to finish just short of the playoffs. Moving into 7th place, and of course the first playoff spot. I've just realised we both haven't said a certain team that I thought was probably my kind of shock to finish in the playoffs. So it must be yours as well, but it might not be. Who have you gone for in 7th place? Have we agreed again?
Woking.
We haven't all. You have gone for Woking. Why have you gone for Woking?
It's just they were knocking on the door, and we always thought they would just be that team that will be the next up to the plate, and then for whatever reason it didn't happen, did it? And Neil Ardley has come in and steadied the ship, was able to implement his ideas. He's a great manager at this level, proven at this level more than one occasion, and I think similar to we talk about Eastleigh, and I talk about getting their act together. I think Woking are a team that can do that and will do that, and will be able to sort of push on. And again, they go along their way. They don't sort of tear up any trees anywhere, but I think they'll just be very, very good. Neil Ardley knows what he's doing. He's got a nucleus of a squad who he's recruited. He knows, they know the league, and I think they'll be very, very good. So tough nut to crack. Hugely difficult to break down. The thing that might hold them back is that firepower, but that's something that holds a lot of teams back, and that's something we can talk about in every club, apart from maybe one or two in the league. So, I think that they'll be okay. They've just got to convert some of the good performances, some of those draws into wins, some of those losses into draws, and I think they'll be that dark horse for the playoffs.
They've retained Timo Akinola as well. He's actually signed back from Gateshead, I believe, to work, and who did very well there for them previously. I think for me overall, I think Woking are going to be a really tough team to beat. I think they'll be the sort of side that will probably play not to lose. That's not in a negative way at all. That's in a way where they're very hard to break down, and they'll frustrate a lot of sides. Very much like probably Halifax have been in the past, or Southend are known for. And I think under Neil Ardley, as well as a manager, he knows what this league's about. He's been in playoff campaigns. I believe he's actually got a side out of this league in the past. No, he didn't actually. He lost in the playoff finals to Notts County, but he's got the experience in this division. And for me, I think that's really key as a manager. He knows what's expected. They're very well backed as well, and they've gone under the radar with this. Last season, they signed a lot of players during the season because they needed to. In the summer, a lot of people probably expected them to splash the cash, and they probably haven't. I actually think that's a positive, because for me, when I look at Woking, it shows that Neil Ardley, the board, feel that they don't need to, and it probably means that they've got cash as the season goes on overall. So you look at last season's squad. If that started the season, and I used to say this on the podcast, they would probably be pushing for the playoffs. And I think now they're in a position where they can, and I think they'll be able to climb into the playoffs because of the manager, because of the way they're going to set up. And I think they've got the ability to be able to bring in players throughout the season. And I think they'll be smart with their recruitment, which is crucial as well with the players that they'll actually bring in. I've heard people actually criticise them not because they've not overly recruited in the summer. They've not signed any big names, but I don't necessarily think they actually needed to. And I think smart additions like Akinola coming back to the side, I think is enough for me. I think Jake Hyde, I've heard mixed things. I don't know if he's come back as a player or a player coach or just as a coach as such, but his experience around the squad as well, someone who's been here and done it, is going to count for a lot. And for me, I think overall I look at Woking, and I think they're in a position, everything's positive there at the moment. They're heading in the right direction, and I think they'll be able to climb into the playoffs. 6th place. We're not going to make it a hat trick of guessing the same predictions, are we? We could very much still with the next one.
I've gone with Hartlepool.
We haven't all. I've gone for Hartlepool as well. I think we might actually have the 7 teams, not in the same order, maybe, the 7 we've got, I think we've all agreed on, which is quite a surprise because we've not spoke to each other at all about our predictions. Hartlepool I've gone for as well. Yeah, why have you gone for Hartlepool?
Alex Reid. No. I mean, obviously, I saw Alex Reid at close quarters last year playing with Wealdstone, and he was one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, Wealdstone did stay up at the end, with his goals. And yeah, someone like Alex Reid needs to be loved, and if the Hartlepool fans take him in and give him a little bit of love and show him a bit of support, then he will score goals for them. And it's not. There's no shock here that Hartlepool are going to be predicting the top 6 that both of us here, Luke, because they're a big football club in this league. They're doing.
It's just the off the field issues. This is the one thing with me where I'm a bit like, this is one where it could be like, I could have had them in the bottom half struggling because of the financial issues. I don't even know if you class it as financial issues, but because of the owner, I could have had them in 6th, and I've chose to put them in 6th.
No, you're right. I think when we talked about Hartlepool last time, Luke, and I know you were very vocal in the fact that they were underachieving with the players that they had. They brought in the lad that was down, Darren Saul. That didn't work out. They tried the Lenny Lawrence model with his team. That didn't work out. They've now gone down an unproven name in the National League, but a proven name in management, both here and abroad, in Simon Grayson, who's been able to bring in some players that, I think have benefited the squad. I think they're going to be stronger in the sense of that. I think you're right. What's going to hold them back is Raj Singh. Raj Singh, sent out that letter this week about not letting Jeff Stelling into any boardroom. And that, I know Jeff Stelling's come out and said, but I'll always go and watch the games. I don't have to be in the boardroom. It was my decision to leave. He tried to back an idea of a consortium coming in, and Raj Singh wouldn't sell the club. That the Hartlepool fans want Raj Singh to sell the club because they need to move on. We see it's a familiar thing that happens in lower league football in terms of ownership. But they're a big team, or should be a big team in this league. And if they can get their act together, a bit like Woking, a bit like Oldham in the past, then they're going to be threatening. And I think the recruitment, coupled with the recruitment of manager Simon Grayson, and the fact they're a club that should be up and around in those positions, I think you're right, Luke. They could easily be in that bottom 5, but I think they're going to be in the top 6 instead.
Yeah, the ownership, I think that's with Raj Singh is a big reason why I've seen a lot of people have them very low, but then I've had a lot of people see them in this position. I've not seen many people have them on the fringes of the playoffs or in mid-table, and I think it will go either way with them. But in terms of recruitment, I think they've recruited well. Letting Disarue go might actually benefit them the way that they want to play, because you are very limited with the way you play when you've got Disarue, because he's kind of like, he has to be the key man. He has to be the centerpiece to every single team because of the way he is as a player, and the type of character that he is overall on the pitch. And I think that could potentially mean that, although he scores a lot of goals, other players probably are limited to what they can do. Of course, Joe Gray's left as well. He's gone to York, which I think that's probably one that disappoints me more. But you think of Disarue leaving and you think of Reid joining, you're not going to get a better replacement. And although they're both seen as prolific strikers, they're both very different type of strikers. Disarue is good at holding the ball up, dropping deep, and, obviously from set pieces. I think Reid's got everything to his game. He's got the speed as well, which Disarue lacks. He's got that ability to be able to take on players as well, and drive forward with the ball overall. And I think as a team overall, it feels like this season they've got a side that I think as a team they can play better together. The name's gone out of my head now. I should have had it written down here. The lad from Bromley they've got on loan. I think
Topolage.
Yeah, I think that'll be a very, very good addition defensively for them. As well, Jermaine Francis has come from Braintree as well in the midfield, in a better team. He'll only get better, still very, very young. And I think they've shipped on a lot of the old players, the likes of Mancini, who's left, who's been very injury prone. And it's meant that there's more room for the new players to come in and thrive. And for me, overall this season, I'm quite optimistic about Hartlepool. I was last season, and I was extremely disappointed with where they finished overall because I thought that squad underachieved. Whereas this season, I think they're probably just as strong, considering the players that they've lost on paper, because the additions that they've made. I'm being very impressed with the additions. And I expect under Simon Grayson, a manager that's managed at a lot higher level, a very demanding manager, I expect them to be looking to get into the playoffs this season. And I think they will. And I think the only thing that's going to hold them back potentially is the thing with the owner. Because I have heard in the past players haven't been paid, etc. And if that does happen again, it's bound to have a detrimental effect on them. But hopefully on the field, which I expect it will be fine, they should finish in the playoffs this season, no question. 5th place then, who have you gone for?
Rochdale.
Oh, we've gone for a different team. Yeah, why have you gone for Rochdale?
Oh, 5th and 4th have gone Rochdale and Southend. So I'm assuming you've probably gone. Oh, there you go. So yeah, Rochdale. I think they're going to do as well as they did last year, and I think they're going to be what they did last year. Is they're not really going to finish the job. You know, they got to the FA Trophy semi-final, didn't quite make it. They got into around the playoffs, didn't make it. You know, Diasawure you just spoke about has gone up, has gone down to Rochdale. They've also signed Levi Manchi. They've got threats through Tarin Alarakia, good football inside. I think that they probably haven't got enough to go up automatically, but they've got enough to trouble the playoffs. And again, you know, they had their off the field problems that got sorted out, and they seem to be a team and a fan base that have respected the league and have come in it, and they're not sort of suggesting they should just be coming in and going straight back out. They're going to earn the right to leave this league once they go, because I see them going in the next few years. But I don't think this year, not with what's just above them and what we're going to talk about in the teams that we've left to pick, but certainly I think they'll be as good, if not slightly better than last year, but I think they will finish 5th.
5th place for myself then, I've gone for Forest Green Rovers. Of course, new manager there has come from Macclesfield in Savage. There's obviously questions about him because he's not managed at this level. He's left Macclesfield. I think the first 2 players he recruited were players actually from Macclesfield. And earlier on in the window, I was getting quite concerned about Forest Green overall with the recruitment. Cairo Mitchell coming from Rochdale. For me, although he seems to score a lot of goals, I don't think he particularly offers that much. And I think when you're in a Rochdale side, I don't think people realise how many chances he probably got and how many he missed. He probably should have scored more than what he did. And I thought the same when he was at Notts County as well and Chesterfield. But obviously today they've kept last season's squad majority. Nick Horton's just signed for them. And last season, if he'd have signed for Forest Green, I'd have been like, yep, decent. I probably won't score as many goals as what he does at Files, and that is the one concern is he's not the main man now. There's a lot of key players at Forest Green. How's he going to deal with that? Because he's been the main man for so long. For me now, I think he'll be fine because last season under Cottrell, Forest Green didn't necessarily need the ball. They would just simply win the ball back, counter-attack quickly, and they'd always find a way to grind out results. They'd never seem to batter teams. This season under Savage, I think they're going to be more dominant in games. I think they're going to dominate games, take the games to the opposition more than what they did last season. And I think we can see them potentially batter a few teams this season. However, there's going to be games as well where I think last season the way they played will probably suit them better against opposition, where this season I don't think it will. And I think under Forest Green, they're going to be a more football inside with this more or less same squad from last season. How are they going to adjust to that? For me, I think over time they'll be fine. I think the additions, the likes of Nick Horton, will benefit them in the way they want to play going forward. I think they'll score a lot of goals, but I can see them conceding a fair few as well with the way that I think they're going to play under Savage from what I've heard and what I've seen in these interviews overall. But I just feel there's going to be a slight drop-off because sides around them, the ones above them, I think are only getting better. And I think the way that Forest Green are going to play this season is going to be different to what it was last season, which might not be as effective. It'll still be effective, but not as effective, if that makes sense. And yeah, I just think I think they'll finish 5th this season. I had them a lot lower a couple of weeks ago, but I think Nick Horton signing it's a big reason for me why I've kept them in the playoffs. Yeah, 4th place. Then who have you gone for?
Southend United. Now, ultimately finished badly for them because they didn't get promoted in the playoff final. But what a good finish to the season they had in terms of pushing up and getting to grips of getting into them playoffs when other teams didn't. I know they didn't make it easy for themselves. None of those teams in and around the playoff places did. Kevin Mayer has stuck with the familiarity of what he knows. He's brought in a couple of lads, Slavy Spazov from Slough, who's going to get a pre-season under his belt of full-time football. I've seen him play a few times for Slough, and they're a local team to me. I've had the opportunity to see him speak to Scott Davis, the Slough town manager, and the kid was picked up because he got badly injured at Oxford United and was released. He's a talent. That he's going to have to be one of those sort of gems that they have found to supplement what they've already got in a lot of good experience. They can't, and you'll probably agree with me, Luke, they can't rely on a wing back to be their top goal scorer as good as Scott Morris is. They can't rely on that. And, I think they're just going to build on what they already have. There's not a massive wholesale change in that team. They obviously haven't changed the manager. The fear could be that there's a hangover from not getting into the Football League from the playoff final. How much does that have an effect? I would suggest it probably has a positive effect. It's going to drive them on to not want to do that again and hope for the best. I just don't think they've quite got that quality across the squad or the park that maybe the top 3 teams that we're going to discuss have. They certainly probably don't have the budget as some of the other teams. And will they have to rely on some loan players, etc.? Who knows? But I think from where they were 2 or 3 seasons ago, Luke, it's a great story, and I think they're going to build on what they did last year. And it's a tough ask to get back to the playoff final, but I think they've got the potential to do it.
I've just realised I've actually got Southend in 4th place, so we have agreed on that one. I've similar reasons to you. I think the way that Southend play and the style, they play not to lose, which is a good way to play for the playoffs. And I think it'll be more or less the same this season under Kevin Mayer. I think that's clear with the same manager. I don't think they'll change the way they're going to play at all. I think they'll play not to lose, but I can't see with that way. I can't see them winning enough games to really be in a title charge, which I think the 3 above them have the credentials to do. I think that these 3 could all potentially put a case together to actually go out to win the title. I think the way Southend play, I don't think they're going to win enough games to be able to do that. Recruitment-wise, I've been very impressed. I think Austin coming in from Notts County, I think it's quite a smart signing. I don't think they particularly needed to splash the cash too much because they already had a strong core of a squad there that they don't particularly want to unsettle. I think as well, players from last season on the forward front are only going to get better. The likes of Charlie Kendall seemed to come into form towards the end of last season. I think Bonn, there's still questions about whether he's going to stay at the club or not. He's someone as well, after him now knowing what the National League's about, he seemed to get better as the season went on. People know what to expect of him more. I think he probably won't have the same pressure on him as well. I've heard rumours that they're going to sign Andrew Dallas, which they may well still sign, and that would be the marquee signing. I think probably the signing on paper that stands out for them. And I just think we know what to expect. They're going to be strong defensively, but I just think they're going to be slightly better going forward this season than what they were last season, and that's why I've got them to finish a little bit higher. And I think they'll be more securely in the playoffs now. And I think, always, of course, it's a long time off. The playoffs of last season have only just gone. But when Southend are in the playoffs next year, they're a side for me that will be built for them. And I think I expect them to do well, and they could easily go up via the playoffs next season if they can just get into them. So yeah, I've got Southend in 4th place. Top 3 then. Who have you gone for in 3rd place?
Forest Green Rovers. Now, Forest Green Rovers need not to be the Forest Green Rovers of last season, where they almost seemed to know that they weren't going to go up, but know they weren't going to get into the playoffs. They were going to get into the playoff semi-finals. They sort of sat in 2nd or 3rd place forever and a day, and it was almost like, I think I use this phrase, they kept their powder dry and they were waiting for the playoffs to come. The problem was, once the playoffs came, it was almost like that they waited so long that they took their foot off the gas. There was just something about them that they just weren't able to then get up for it, and clearly then got beaten. So I don't think that will happen under Robbie Savage. I like the appointment of Robbie Savage. I think it was a bit of an odd one that he left Macclesfield, whatever's gone on there, whether he's turned around and said he needs to do it for himself and his family and everything else, which is fair enough. How him and Dale Vince, the mixture goes, who knows? But, it's on paper, it looks good for social media purposes, doesn't it? If we're fans of the National League. But they're a club that have got money. They're a club that are well run. And, I think getting Nick Horton this week was an incredible bit of business, Luke. And you often said last year, especially, AFC Fylde relied on him. Nick Horton, and to him to now get what we perceive to be a top 3 team is the move that he probably wanted, and he's probably one of those missing pieces for Forest Green to kick on and be better than they were last year. I think last year they were just stuck in that.
It felt like they were in a false position, didn't it? Them being in 3rd place.
Going through the motions. And then obviously was it Southend they played, and they, could they get up for it? No, they couldn't. Southend beat them at their place, and all of a sudden, they're out of the playoffs and not going to go up. So Steve Cottrell then didn't last too much longer, and I think they could be more exciting this season. I think they've got a challenge of 2 big sides above them with big budgets, big aspirations, and that's probably why they're going to finish 3rd. That's not to say they won't go up, but I can't see them finishing above the 2 that I've got here, which I believe are going to be very similar to what you have, Luke.
Yeah, I think so, to be fair. But I think just finally on Robbie Savage, before we move on from Forest Green, I think for him to make this step up, if there was any club in the National League that would suit him, it would be Forest Green, where he's got a budget to work with once again. There, I think it is the perfect move for him to move away from Macclesfield. Maybe not geographically, but I think it does with the budget that he has there. But of course, there is going to be a lot of pressure on him, and if it doesn't start well there, it could go pear-shaped very quickly, but I think they'll probably be okay. 3rd place for me then, I've gone for newly relegated Carlisle United. They've come down and they're trying to make a statement with the signings that they've made so far. They're clearly not messing around. They don't want to stay in this division for long. I've spoke to a few of their fans on social media since they've come down. And yeah, they're very much with the opinion of, we're going to get out of this league this season with the money that we've spent. You can spend loads of money. Look at the money Wrexham did in that first season, and you can still not get promoted. And for me, I think Carlisle will get a bit of a shock for the first couple of months of the season when they come down into this division. Of course, Mark Hughes, we've gone from Robbie Savage to Mark Hughes now. A good. I think he's done well at Carlisle. I think overall in his managerial career, he's managed at a high level, but there's obviously mixed opinions about him overall as a manager. They've splashed the cash. The likes of Linney's obviously come into the side. Armstrong, obviously from last season, Luke Armstrong, who's been prolific in this division again. So you've got Linney, Armstrong. Then they had another right winger who's gone out of my head, who they had on the right-hand side as well. They're clearly not messing about defensively. Aaron Hayden, keep him fit. He's one of the best defenders in this division. It's all about keeping him fit. Whelan, midfield, one of the best midfielders in this division. There's got a lot of players who know what this division's about, and that's one thing I'll respect Carlisle for, is the fact that they've not come down trying to sign players from League Two to drop down into this division. They're signing players that are proven in this division, top-end National League players, and I think that's what's crucial to them, and that's why I think they'll actually do well and finish third. And there were some people that are saying that's not acceptable, but for me, I think that very much is for your first season in the National League. But I just think the reason they're going to finish third and they're not going to go on to win the title is because the sides above them have been working towards getting out of this division for a number of years, and Carlisle have just got into this division. It's going to take a while for them to adjust, even with the squad that they've got. And I think by the time they've adjusted, I think the other two sides might be way ahead of them, if I'm being honest. So I've got Carlisle United in third place. Second place, then, who've you gone for then, Paul?
Carlisle United.
I wonder why.
Listen, I'm right here, big budget experienced manager. I think irrespective of who the manager was, in this case, it is Mark Hughes, who is a big name, who has managed at the EFL level, Premier League level, played at that international level. You know, a real experienced manager, and depends on what team you support. Some will say he's good, some will say he's rubbish. But yeah, irrespective of who it was, Carlisle kept their manager. He decided he wanted to stay and take the team in the National League. I think that was important for Carlisle because they didn't have to go and find a manager as well as restructure their squad in a National League environment. Yes, they've splashed the cash, but I think you're right. They've done it in a manner which suits the league rather than just going for names, which I think sometimes, did Forest Green do that last year to a point? Have other teams done that? I think it's going to be a tough place to go for other teams. It's a long way to go, but Carlisle are used to travelling the length and breadth of Britain now because they've been in the EFL as a full-time team. You've got to have other teams have got to go to Carlisle. So that's going to be a difficult one, a difficult place to go and get points. So I think as long as they don't fall foul of that, we're going to win the league, we're not going to stay in this league too long, we're too good for this league. As long as the club and the management and playing side don't adopt that attitude, they'll be okay. The fans can be like that all day long. And we've seen many a fan of many a club be like that, Luke, and eat humble pie at the end of the National League season and stand there and have to say, yeah, that was tougher than we thought. As long as Carlisle go into this, a bit like Rochdale have when they've come down, and be like Hartlepool have when they've come down, Sutton United, respect the league, respect the teams that are in it. It is a tough, tough league to get out of. Only one can go up. The toughest league in the world for that, I think. Sorry, one can go up automatically. Obviously, two go up. So out of 24 teams, and that top 7, 8, 9, 10 will all want to be getting promoted. So Carlisle, as long as they've got their heads screwed on collectively, I think are a big team and will challenge for that title.
Yeah. I think they'll just fall short. I just think the first couple of months, I think they'll struggle. But, I think Mark staying, to be fair, back end of last season, I've said about his previous managerial jobs, he seemed to improve it there at Carlisle. So that is a positive. And like I've said, recruitment-wise, it couldn't have gone any better for them. Overall, in my opinion. But I just look back to the previous decade, and the only side that I think's got promoted from the National League, who weren't actually expected to get promoted, they only did because of the playoffs, was actually Grimsby when they came down, and they knew what this division's about. Some will say, well, Carlisle do, but the last time they were in this division were 20 years ago. It's a completely different division to then. And I think a lot of people are not Carlisle fans, potentially, and not realising that. And when they go to Braintree away, when they go to Tamworth away, they'll realise what this division's about. But you go from that to someone like York or someone like Southend, and you realise this league isn't a non-league division. Obviously, technically it is, but it shouldn't be. Second place, then, for me, I spoke about sides that I think are building towards getting into the Football League. I think second place have probably had the best summer in terms of recruitment across the entire division, and that would be Rochdale. Yeah, they've retained last season's squad. 14 players from last season have managed to retain. All those are key starting 11 players. The likes of Sam Beckwith, who could potentially have moved on, Harvey Gilmore, are still at the club. And they've added to that with some real quality that won't unsettle that 11, but will only make it better. For example, Cairo Mitchell leaving. No major loss. They've replaced that with an even better striker in Manny Di Sarue. Some have questioned whether he'd fit into their system. And I think some people are not realising the type of striker that Di Sarue can be. I think the lazy eye sees him as just an average target man who you cross the ball into. There's a lot more to his game than that. I think in terms of him dropping deep, that's something that he can do in Rochdale's system in the way they want to play. Mancini, of course, has joined Rochdale as well. I think that's a great signing for me overall. And I just feel, look, across the board, I look at Rochdale and I think they've got last season's squad. They've added to it with some real quality. They've got the likes of Alarakia there from last season who can cross the ball into Di Sarue. They've still got the likes of Devante Rodney as well, who's a prolific goal scorer if he can stay fit. I just feel this Rochdale side as a starting 11 and as a squad, it won't be unsettled. They finished fourth last season with that squad, and I think they're a lot better than what they were last season, and that's why I think they're going to really push on this year and finish in second place for me. The title winners now, then, aren't we?
Well, I think we both got the same, haven't we? And
there's absolutely no excuses for these, by the way. This better not be seen as like, oh, thanks, Luke, for putting us top. No one should not have these top. And if they don't finish top, then they've underachieved significantly as well, I'm saying. And of course, in first place, who have you gone for then?
Gone for the York City. I think you're right, Luke. They failed at the last hurdle last season.
Can let them off
in the playoffs. You know, it was a bit of a calamity for them, really. They will learn from that. They haven't got Barnet in this league, who got 102 points. You know, I mean, to finish second to 102 points is nuts, isn't it? I mean, they did so well consistently last year, and hats off to Barnet that went toe to toe with them, and a little bit with Forest Green, and you know, managed to get promoted up to the EFL. So York are that next team up to the plate. We've seen Notts go, Wrexham go, Barnet go. Now I think York are the ones. You know, they've got a good manager. Their owners kept himself in the background a little bit more in the last season or two. Their recruitment has been okay. He's got rid of a few players that he didn't want. I mean, there's not a lot to say about York City. They're the team to beat. They're the team everyone will want to beat, but they're the team that will want to beat everyone else. And I think they will win the league this season. And especially if they get off to a good start, because they'll get big crowds. You know, it's a decent little ground up there at the LNER Community Stadium, and they will get behind their team. And I think, you know, York City won't be in the National League come this time next year.
Absolutely no excuses for them not to win this league. Last season, overall, you can let them off. They got 96 points and didn't get promoted. Failed in the playoffs to a good Oldham side. They didn't turn up on the day. It didn't particularly feel fair, I think, overall. But they knew the rules before ball was kicked. And yeah, they failed last season, but they got 96 points. This season, I think if they can get 96 points, they will win this league for me overall. And I think with the money that they've spent on top of last season's squad, not losing anyone significant, there's no excuses. 96 points last season. They've only added to that with quality. I can't see them getting any weaker, but they're not weaker. They're a lot stronger. And with Barnet gone now, there's no one for me particularly who could touch them overall. I just think that they'll be too good. The only concern I've got in terms of the newcomers is they've signed players that are going to want to start. And I said this when Stones actually signed for York City overall. I said, well, how are they going to keep Pearce happy and how are they going to keep Stones happy? Because they're both going to want to start. And it did kind of show at times last season. And that's the one concern for me is with the amount of new players that are coming that are key, crucial players. They're not squad players. Is the squad going to be unsettled overall? Is Hinchelwood going to know his best 11? And that was his concern. That was only his downfall last season, was at times changing it up and not knowing his best 11. However, I just can't see them not winning this league with that quality. The likes of Banks, the likes of Newby coming in, the likes of Boateng coming from Mansfield, Greg Ollie's coming, Joe Gray's coming, on top of the likes of Pearce, Callum Howe defensively, the additions of Ash Palmer. It doesn't feel fair, to be honest. If you're one of the other 23 sides, it genuinely doesn't feel fair. But I am genuinely saying this, with that much quality does come its headaches, and those headaches could potentially be not knowing your best 11, keeping squad morale okay, because for me overall, I can't see why they wouldn't. And there will be fans out there who said, well, we've loaned loads of players out, but a lot of those loan players last season were squad players and were happy to be squad players. This season, you've got a 25-man squad, I believe, and all those players should be starting, are players that expect to be starting, who could probably all play majority of them could all play in the EFL. Anything to add on that? But for me, I just don't think York can be touched.
No, I think it's easier to be in a squad that's winning, Luke. I mean, you go to the very top of the pyramid and you look at Manchester City and you look at the players that sit on their bench and don't get in their 18, the Grealishes and Fodens and all that's, £100 million players. They're all happy to be there because they're winning and they do contribute over the period of the season. And I think you're right. It's the biggest challenge for Hinchelwood is picking the best mix, the best 11, so that they can sort of almost go on and do what is expected of them. If you're a National League enthusiast, blogger, analyst, many are going to have York at the top end. I think the other challenge that York have, and maybe Carlisle and Forest Green, those teams, other teams want to go to these teams and beat them, and no disrespect, but teams are going to be much more up for wanting to play York City than they are Wealdstone, and Wealdstone are going to go to York and it'd be a little bit of a cup final, sort of like, we've got to beat York, so York have to contend with that. Carlisle have to contend with that everyone's going to go and up their game against them. And that's where they've got to be that much better, at times to win games and pick draws out of losing positions potentially. But you're right. I think you've rattled off the names. You don't have to sort of keep saying them. It's a 25-man squad alone is a bonus. Mm-hmm. We talked about squads in this league.
It might be more now, actually.
Yeah, we talk about squads that have got 18. Squads that have only got 16 signed on, et cetera, et cetera. So to have 20 plus players who potentially could get in any other National League team, let alone EFL teams, they are in a really, really strong position that they're only going to lose the league themselves, if that makes sense. And I hope people understand that the others have got to beat them. I can't, and I'm like you, I can't see them over the to get 96 points last year, not get promoted. They do that again, they'll get promoted. So
100%.
I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I can't see anyone coming close to York. If I'm being honest, on paper, I don't think anyone should. And I think they should be fine and they should go up this season. Overall, I think we've seen a trend in the last couple of years as well. We saw last year Barnet. Previous year had that heartache, finishing third, I believe, second actually, and not going up. The year before it was Chesterfield, who missed out because of in the playoff final. It seems to be a bit of a trend going where those who are missing out are then building even stronger for the following season and then go on to win the league. And I think this time around, it probably is York's turn to go on to actually get promoted to the Football League. But like you've said, there'll be a lot of pressure on them this year, more than last season. But no, that more or less wraps up our predictions. It certainly has been a long one tonight. Paul, thanks for joining me once again to doing this.
No problem, mate.
I do really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have to reflect on these at the end of the season.
Yeah, they're all written down here, Luke. So
yeah,
we'll do our mid-season one, and then we'll look at the end of the season, see how wrong we got. I think I did okay over the last season. I think
you
I
were
came
best out of all the content creators.
So on an average point things, but it's going to be more difficult this time around. But yeah, an interesting league. You know, is it weaker? Is it stronger? Is there more weaker teams? You know,
weaker and stronger in different parts.
We talk about that first 10 to 15 games, don't we? Get to October, see where the land lies and how teams are faring. And like I said, I'm off to the Vale on Saturday to watch Wealdstone play in New Boys Truro, see how they get on. I think you guys are down at Braintree, is that right? So you know. And then the games start to come thick and fast. There's a couple of midweek games, National League Cup if your team's involved. So, yeah, lots of games in that first month of the season to really sort of see how we've fared in terms of predictions, in terms of what players will do what. So, no, we're looking forward to it. The weather should be nice and get out and watch a bit of football again.
100%. Good to be back and good to be covering the National League for another season.